Good evening, relatives. Jen Marley here. Welcome back to the Red Nation Podcast. Today we have what I think is a very historic episode. I am very excited to welcome guests from Indian Collective as well as all Pueblo Council of Governors. Today we're going to be following up about some of the latest news around protecting the Greater Chaco Canyon region. You may have seen Indian Collective posting updates about this. We've been active on our social media as well. But this is a hot topic right now, and we wanted to dive in a little bit deeper following the live conversation we hosted a couple weeks back. So, without further ado, you all know me, but I'm going to introduce myself again. My name's Jennifer Marley. Nawite wakawe po pohore winge iweri omu. And I would like to pass it on to our guest, Teran Villa of the All Pueblo Council of Governors. Thank you again for joining us. I think this is historic because we're having a representative of APCG, and it is just an honor to have you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Greetings, everyone. My name is Soda Dam and I have my clan as Eagle. I hail from the Pueblo of Jemez, Walatoa, New Mexico, and I serve as the executive director for the All Pueblo Council of Governors under the leadership of Chairman Mark Mitchell, Vice Chairman Jerome Lucero, and Governor Arden Kukate. So thank you so much for having me on and allowing us some space to talk about the importance of protecting Chaco Canyon and sharing that space with many important people here today. Thank you. And I'll pass it on to Miss Shay.
Yeah, Teran, yad anutwa Cheyenne Antonio Yuchia. So initially, Tachitli Bashishchin, Hishkin Dashiche, Ani Dashanele, and my Nakodishki, Chinele, dot not Nezine, that Nasa, dot ha, the Nota, you said that Nasha. So thank you, comrades, for inviting me here. I'm a Red Nation member, but also a community organizer within the Greater Chaco landscape. And I'll pass it to Janene.
Oh, yeah, Deja, yad everyone, Janene Yazzie. Tidna Janine Shlando Todachini, Bashishchin, Nathlana Dashichedo, Zithgai Dachanella. Tessa Anna Denasha. I am the Southwest Regional Regional Director for Indian Collective, and I will pass it to Jade.
Yeah, and Kotawaha, Janine, and Red Nation for having us. Yeah, day everybody, and I'm Jade Begay. I'm a citizen of Tesuque Pueblo and the Policy and Advocacy Director at NDN Collective.
Thank you so much again, everybody. So I'm just going to go around and jump right into questions. Janine, can you get us up to date on what's been happening with the Chaco work, right? Our longtime listeners know that this is long, ongoing work. Oh, the prayer. Okay, you're right. Sina, take that out. Next, I'd like to invite our sister Cheyenne to offer a prayer to get us started.
Yeah, Dan. You can edit this too. Hodal Hajodole, Nihimana Stan, Shadian, Shitwa, At Init Nihitian, Unless Sisnajin, Sodze, Dog Osli, the Benta, Jordan. Just now, Dilly, Art Init Nihitian. Ashore Nihikangi, Doles, Nihit East, Nihit Eating, Art Init Nihitian. Nihima, Dot Nihija, 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 Masanda, Nihiche. Nihianele Espino, Nihianele Estan, Adin, Nihidian, Nihit China, So thank you, Creator, for bringing us together in full circle as we continue to protect our communities and health. May you continue to take care of our families and our loved ones as we continue to move forward to protect our sacred sites, as we continue to protect our homelands together. May you continue to bless our health, our physical, emotional, spiritual, and collective well-being as we move forward to educate our people and to guide our people forward to protect themselves and put their health first. May you continue to protect our language and our water and our resources as we move forward. And may we continue to come united and not divided, and may we continue to grow together and hold each other and care for each other in the space. May you continue to take care of us at the front lines and ensure that our safety is always at the front. May you continue to take care of our children who have to navigate through this world, and may you continue to protect our loved ones all across the world and indigenous people all across the world.
Good Nawahashe. All right. So, Janene, can you tell us a little bit about what's been happening, kind of get us up to date? For our longtime listeners, you might be familiar with what's been going on in the Greater Chaco Canyon region. For those of us who were able to catch the live stream, you might have heard us preface this, but we're kind of going to go into depth a little bit more about what's happening. So, what has been happening? I know these updates are coming constantly. Just last night, there was a pretty significant meeting. So, yeah, please take it away.
Absolutely. There's a lot of history involved in this that we don't really have the time or ability to dig into, but I do want to make sure to mention that this isn't a new issue. This is the result of decades of work of grassroots people, Alatis, and many organizations that have been on the ground for a long time, like Dene Care, the Greater Chaco Coalition, and other, like the Red Nation and other organizations that have been working around the protection of sacred sites. And so what has really happened in the last 2 months has been sort of this introduction of a narrative around the creation of the buffer zone, that this is a Navajo and Pueblo conflict, and that we have competing interests in the protection of the sacred site. And so I think that's what's really created a lot of the misinformation and mischaracterization around what the buffer zone actually accomplishes, and it completely erases and invisibilizes the years of hard work between Navajo and Pueblo people to protect our shared heritage and to honor that we have deep historical connections, cultural connections, and spiritual connections to this very pivotal place. And so, there's a lot of technical things that we could go into about what the Honoring Chaco initiative actually is. But, in the gist of it, it's a 20-mile or 10-mile buffer zone, 10-mile buffer zone, in which the federal lands within that buffer zone now have a moratorium to prevent new oil and gas leases. And what we have seen with the seeding of the narrative that this is a Navajo and Pueblo conflict is really the spread of misinformation that this buffer zone threatens Alati rights that are within that boundary. And this is a very significant thing to handle with care, because it is important to note that there is complex history in the establishment of the park in the first place, and that Alatis have faced threats to their land rights, both from the park itself, but also from the introduction of these extractive industries into our communities. And so what we've done is that we've been trying to mobilize to really identify the source of misinformation, to clarify that this is not a land grab, that this is actually a pause on a very, very harmful activities that are threatening both the sacred site, but also the health of the land, the the safety of the water and the health of the people in and around this area, so that we can maintain clarity and purpose in that when Navajo and Pueblo people work together, we can accomplish great things for the protection of our peoples and for our shared future. And what we have seen is that it's really been the result of misinformation spread through the administrative turnover and tribal government on the Navajo Nation. It seems that our current leaders weren't properly prepped, are given enough information to truly understand the length of consultation and of work and of government to government meetings that have occurred between Navajo and Pueblo leadership. Or the decades of research and data collection and advocacy that has been led by community members and Alati members themselves, as well as grassroots organizations on Navajo Nation. And what we are seeing is that in seeding this false information, it's really creating a sense of fear among our own people, and creating like this idea that that we're somehow in conflict with one another, and that this initiative is something that has been conducted top down in a way that violates Navajo sovereignty. And what we want to do and what we want to clarify for everyone is to break through a lot of that misinformation and reiterate that this has been a grassroots movement. It has also been a movement supported by Navajo and Pueblo leadership, that this is not a land grab, that all this does is affect federal lands, and it has no impact on existing leases. As well as the fact that this is just the first step towards a larger effort to restore the rights of people who are in and around the Chaco region, but while protecting us from further destructive oil and gas development. And I'll pause there because I know there's so many different things to go into that the rest of the panelists will cover.
Yeah, thank you, Janene. Real quick, who are some of the actors behind the spread of this misinformation?
Oh, well, what we know, some of the actors that are behind this really come from the Boo-Nygren administration. We saw like a really inflammatory remarks made through Fox News, that this was a land grab, that people, that they were calling for a blockade to block access to Chaco Canyon. But there also have been bad actors on the ground, and it remains to be seen whether or not this is their own misunderstanding that they're spreading, or whether this is intentional. But we did see on the ground, like Delegate Danny Simpson, who represents many of the communities around the Chaco region, also reiterating some of this false information, as well as one of the Alatis that is for oil and gas. And I think that distinction needs to be very clear. The Alatis are themselves representing different interests. There are many who are against oil and gas development, and there are many who are for it. And those that are for it are really concerned about the economic well-being of their families, and the ability to support themselves. And then there are some people who are taking advantage of that. And one of those individuals that we've seen on the ground really inflaming the situation is Irvin Chavez. And so I think these individuals do need to be named, because we need to understand why they are spreading misinformation to our communities, and why some of our Navajo Nation elected leadership isn't coming out and providing more clear and factual information directly to the communities in our own language, so that they can better understand what this initiative does and does not do.
Thank you so much, Janene. Very vital information. So not only does the order not affect existing leases, it also does not affect the ability to enter into new leases on Navajo trust land or individual Navajo allotments. So That is a really big point of clarification. Thank you so much for that. Next question I have is for Teran. Can you talk about the 10-mile withdrawal and why the Honoring Chaco initiative is so important, not just to Pueblos, but to natives everywhere?
Thank you, Jennifer, and appreciate your overview, Ms. Yazzie. The 10-mile withdrawal area surrounding Chaco Culture National Historical Park is consequential for Pueblo and Navajo and tribal people alike on what we call here Nomatahize, Mother Earth. It is an exemplification of empowering and reclaiming a narrative to steward our people, our mothers, our children, and our landscapes. The 10-mile withdrawal area was a set of protections that were designed by local Navajo people calling upon the Navajo Nation and seeking their support and seeking the support of the Navajo Nation president and the council to explore options to address legacy mineral development surrounding Chaco Culture National Historical Park. Because for generations, there has been an approximate 91% of federal lands that have been already leased for oil and gas development. The consequence of that oil and gas development has been harm and destruction to traditional cultural properties, to our people, and the vitality of our communities. So in response to those challenges, and underscored by the need of Navajo community and Navajo leadership to be part of the conversations, the Pueblo leaders and the Pueblo governors who comprise the All Pueblo Council of Governors, an organization that has been around since an estimated 1598, preceding Spain, Mexico, and the United States, came together over decades to think about what are ways our ancestral footprint can be protected from oil and gas development, including all mineral leasing. And recognizing that Navajo Nation has cultural ties to Chaco Canyon, much like the Pueblo people, and the Pueblo governors decided to work government to government in a historic way to ensure that the interests of Navajo Nation, including their cultural resources and ties to the landscape, would also be incorporated into whatever decisions or determinations for protections would be. And we underscore here today, and are proud to underscore here today, that Navajo Nation allottees and their people would also be incorporated into protections and decisions. And drawn from really a series of discussions dating back from 2016, 2017, and 2018, came a process in which Senator Tom Udall and the rest of the New Mexico delegation listened to tribal leaders in what would be one of the most historic sessions and times in American history to decide what landscape protection should be, to listen from indigenous peoples, to take the time to listen from tribal leaders and their peoples and their communities, to understand what the concerns are from the development, from impositions that the federal government has imposed upon indigenous peoples and nations. And the response was an overwhelmingly powerful conception of the 10-mile withdrawal area. That is what Secretary Deb Haaland's decision of federally removing lands and minerals within an approximate 10-mile withdrawal area means. It's reclaiming power for indigenous peoples. It's reclaiming power for children, young women, and all of our people, to know that if we protect our landscapes, we protect our people, we protect our mothers, and we protect our children. And that is just one example of why it is a historic decision by Secretary Haaland to take and move in this step to listen to tribes in a complex landscape that Chaco encompasses and is situated on, which is federal, state, and private lands, as well as Navajo Alati lands. So I underscored the significance of the 10-mile withdrawal area to share that, and to also describe that the Honoring Chaco initiative, which was born from President Biden's historic announcement that Chaco Canyon would be one of his top 5 priorities, including to ensure that landscape level protections would be taken, would be to do an entire assessment of land management in the region. So thank you, Jennifer, for asking the question, and that is a little bit of background behind why the 10-mile withdrawal is important and what the Honor Chaco initiative looks to exemplify.
Thank you so much for that very eloquent and detailed information. That is the first time I've heard it consolidated in that way, personally. Thank you so much. My next question is for Shai. So, what is happening on the ground? You're from Pueblo, Pintado. You're from the Greater Chaco Canyon region yourself. And so, what is happening that our listeners might not be really hearing or seeing in these, in the news or in any of these narratives? And why are the Alatis frustrated?
Thank you, Jen. Um, did you ask why are the Alatis frustrated? Is that what you asked? Yeah. I believe it's since the leasing, since Farmington Bureau of Land Management started really pushing leases back in like 2013, 2014, really pushing and tearing families apart. And so ever since then, I feel like Alatis have asked, like, what's in my contract? What am I signing? What is this about? What does this mean? So I can totally see the frustrations, and I have been hearing it for years from my family members of questions going unanswered and meetings going to the limit to where information is not translated. And so if you look at Bureau of Land Management meetings, like literally YouTube it. Greater Chaco Coalition has done a really good job in posting testimonies on mostly every Bureau of Land Management hearing there has been. And time again, you see Alatis, you see elders, um, and and to be quite honest, like some of them are no longer here because of the pandemic too. And so you have the pandemic on top of this, on the struggle, and we've lost a lot of family members who had concerns and can no longer voice them because that time is now gone. And I think the Bureau of Land Management did a really good job at that, at just pushing this issue to the point where we're silent. And I think that's where a lot of the Alatis were at, are at, because we don't really get the full responsibility of the Bureau of Indian Affairs upholding its end to assure Alatis get the information that they deserve, or to better understand contracts. And so that's where we are. So I of course, not knowing all of this and not knowing what's in your contract, why aren't you getting paid? Whose financial responsibility is that? That's right. That's not something that we here can control. And often time and time again, right? I'm always told, Shy, be quiet. You don't own land, but I do help my grandparents understand. And we do go to Window Rock. We do go to the federal Indian mining office to understand what's happening. And time again, like that's where a lot of the confusion is coming from. And just with the recent blockade, a lot of my elders were there, and as soon as the peacemaking started, right, a lot of them were like, okay, you guys aren't going to steal my land. And so Delegate Simpson from the Resource and Development Committee of the Navajo Nation Council was successful in misguiding our community members, specifically our Alatis. And the way I think of Alatis is like business owners, right? They're responsible for whatever they could do, and that's fine. But where is the Navajo Nation support? And that's something like on the ground that we're talking about is like, well, what is Boo doing on Fox News igniting a protest? While there are folks in Yazzie and Pueblo Pintado and Counselor who are wondering about their Alati rights. And what other alternatives is the nation and BIA and the Indian Minerals Office providing beyond minerals? Like, why is it just Indian Minerals Office? Like, why can't it be Indian and solar office? But like we're so limited, Alatis are so limited to just exploiting their minerals as they should, right? We're not telling them not to, but we are telling them, it is your responsibility to do whatever it is that you please. But it is hard on a lot of us who have to continue to look at these contracts and translate them. And the most respect that we can have as the net people on the ground, the most simple respect that we could have is to have this whole issue translated into our language in the most meaningful way possible. And we haven't seen that from this new administration, from the president, from the vice president, from the speaker, all these folks who are all of a sudden pushing forward this misinformation. All this whole process needs to be translated in Dinepizad, and on the ground that's what we're talking about. And we're also shutting down a lot of misinformation. And when I say we, I mean me and my family members who are longtime neighbors to the Jemez Pueblo, longtime neighbors to Zia Pueblo. We've worked together through hunting grounds, through feast days. Name one Diné person that has not gone to a Pueblo feast day. Like, come on. And so all of this misinformation and this pressure of pinning us against each other, I challenge like all of us to, challenge that. That's not right. And coming from the weekend where it's summertime, so there's ceremony going on all across our nations, right? And over the weekend, as I was home, my grandmother was sharing. She was like, "So I guess we're going to war with Pueblos, right?" And I was like, "No, no, we're not going to war. Like, don't say that. Where'd you hear that from?" And she heard it from some of the lead pro oil. She heard it from a lead pro oil group that's located in Yazzie. And my grandma told me that her grandson, who she takes care of on a regular basis, I guess her grandson went to a daycare and they asked him, "Which one are you today? Who are you for today? Are you for the Pueblos or are you for the Diné?" Because this little baby is both. And we have our little children out there listening to adults, have this conversation about land and territories, but it's really coming down to adults asking children, whose side are you on? Like our little babies who are from this area, from our territories here in Pueblo Pintado, who we love and cherish and take care of. And before this blockade, that wasn't even a concern. That was something we weren't even talking about. But now that we're hearing like all of the misinformation being spread and this fire being ignited by our president leader, as we're on the ground, it really it's now putting us in a place to where we're talking about safety of each other and our children. And it's 2023 and we shouldn't be explaining ourselves to children of whose side should they choose. That's not right. That's harmful. And I just want folks to know that, that's not the direction we need to be going in. And the direction we should be going in is holding these leaders accountable, because they continue to pin things on us while they're here creating more mess for us to clean up. And so I just want to share that for now. Thank you, Jen. It's a mess. It's a mess on the ground.
Thank you, Shy. Yeah, I've said it before, but I think it's interesting considering the fact that the average Pueblo person has no idea that these narratives are being spread, right? That people are kind of speaking in this way. You know, those in APCG and those of us who are on top of politics do, but thinking about my cousins and my aunties back home, they'd probably be very shocked to hear something like that, right? It very shows that it is one-sided and it's being stoked very suddenly and very abruptly, which tells me that that is not how the average Diné person thinks either, right? This is something that is coming from an outside influence, which kind of brings me to my next question, which I want to point at Jade. So, how do you think this issue is related to what's playing out, or how do you see this playing out like on the local level in relation to how it's playing out on the national level, right? When it comes to the broader conservative agenda, you had mentioned that you saw what's happening on the ground is kind of like a microcosm of what's happening at the national level politically.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think, the success of the misinformation campaign around Chaco and around the Honoring Chaco initiative brings the techniques supporting the broader conservative agenda right to our doorstep. So yeah, like you said, in many ways, this is a microcosm of the macro, meaning what's happening, in this rural community is also happening across the country and to be frank, like across the globe, with conservative parties and nationalists, etc. And even just, looking at recent decisions out of the Supreme Court or the insurrection on January 6th and how the right and the conservative faction has manufactured lies and just underscoring like they are heavily orchestrated lies to overturn our rights and our freedoms and our legal protections that our relatives and our movement ancestors and our ancestors have fought so hard for. So yeah, we need to remember, the essence of misinformation. It's driven by the need to deceive in order to achieve one's goal. And we know from all the actions of the conservative faction and the extreme right, and also from oil and gas, that their goal is to reduce protections of land and environment in order to expand their profits. We see this happening with the larger national campaign, the right-led campaign to co-opt permitting reform, to expand oil and gas drilling and mining across public lands. We also saw this with the attacks on ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, to dismantle tribal sovereignty. And to touch on something that Janene shared, a major theme in misinformation campaigns is to create a sense of fear. And what we are seeing with the narratives being fed in Navajo right now, that's what they're doing. They're, preying on the fears, and that is just such an insidious aspect of all of this. They're preying on, the fears around making a livelihood or being displaced, and that's not okay. But what is working to our advantage and to no one's surprise, oil and gas, Navajo Nation have yet to provide factual information to back their claims. So that's where we have a lot of work to do, and like I said, that's to our advantage, and it's really important that we continue to work and expose the strategy of white supremacy and capitalism and how these few powerful people are using misinformation and government to create and deepen division to advance their own interests at the expense of everyone else. At the end of the day, they don't care about the well-being of rural communities or native communities. Again, it's about their profits. And that's the work we've been trying to do with our or the work we've been trying to uplift, right, is to combat that misinformation so that we can move towards building a shared narrative between Pueblo and Diné people around the root of all of those inequalities. And the root of the problem, as I've mentioned, and it's come up multiple times in this conversation, is the oil and gas industry.
Thank you so much for that, Jade. Again, vital context. And I hope that gives our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with the Southwest and kind of the landscape we deal with here, just an idea of how this is not separate from, these trends, sometimes very disturbing trends we're seeing at the national level. We're actually going to be doing a podcast shortly on some recent SCOTUS determinations and decisions, so stay tuned for that. I want to direct the next question back to Teran, just to talk about a little bit about what the significance of Chaco Canyon is to Pueblo people, right? Of course, within appropriate parameters. What do you think else? What else do you think needs to be done to protect this broader area? What can we all do to play our part? I think I've been asking myself, how can Pueblo people be more involved, and how can Pueblo people be more supportive of our Diné relatives?
Thank you all for the conversation. I think it's so powerful to hear from frontline community members and community who are in solidarity. I think it's so helpful to understand and contextualize this conversation about a landscape protection effort, while not also failing to recognize those who live on the ground and are facing the impacts daily. You asked a question about the significance of Chaco, in the context of the Pueblo paradigm. Chaco Canyon is a significant cultural archaeological site, and it is situated and nestled within the Chaco Culture National Historical Park. This area was so significant to Western paradigm and archaeology that it was designated as a monument in 1908, approximately. And in its designation, some of the most significant areas known to Western archaeology were this Pueblo Bonito, other sites, Great Kivas, and those are significant landmarks of the Pueblo ancestral footprint. There, the cultural connections of the Pueblo people to Chaco Canyon are present to this day. We have and enjoy oral histories and languages of Tewa, Tiwa, Towa, Keres, and Zuni that are still practiced, that were derived and established at areas like Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, and other separate but interrelated landscapes and landmarkers in the history and migration stories of Pueblo people. But the overall and underscoring significance of Chaco Canyon is that it is and has been an area of such significance to the Pueblo people that it stands as a landmarker today as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Despite that, there is the conception that Pueblo people don't have a ongoing connection to the landscape, and that is not true. Our languages are pertinent, our stories, our histories rely on the landscape itself in ways that it is necessary to protect the area so that we can maintain our current and existing cultural ways of life. So in terms of the significance of Chaco Canyon, that is the Pueblo paradigm. But I'm also proud to share that Chaco Canyon has a paradigm important to Navajo and the Hopi tribe as well. This is something that is important because that shared cultural connection is what had led to Chaco Canyon being defined as a cultural landscape protection effort, both by Navajo and the Pueblo people in general. And that led to the protection and the 10-mile withdrawal area to be designed and to be supported by not only Democrats but Republicans alike. As an example, when the Chaco Culture Heritage Area Protection Act of 2019 was introduced, a former Vice President of the Navajo Nation, Myron Leiser, testified in a hearing in the Subcommittee on National Parks, Forests, and Public Lands, the Navajo Nation support. And I think to the everyday American and relative who is listening, we all understand that Vice President Leiser was a Republican and an important person within the Navajo Nation executive leadership who was championing efforts in a bipartisan way. This permanent legislation, which is the Chaco Culture Heritage Area Protection Act, which is a concept that would make what is now the administrative withdrawal decision a permanent protection effort, was also championed and supported by Republican members throughout Congress, including Representative Tom Cole as an example. So the significance of Chaco Canyon, not only to Pueblo people, but to Navajo, the Hopi, and other tribes, led to it being a national monument, but also led the response and the design of protections to also incorporate that of a bipartisan effort. Unfortunately, the facts of what the 10-mile withdrawal effort and protections are today have been misconstrued. And for those reasons, we now see a departure in what was once a historic bipartisan effort. And that is the unfortunate reality that we have to reclaim power against, to share that this landscape is important, not only to everyone who is indigenous, but as well as the American people.
Right, there's so many instances of Pueblo and Diné solidarity that come to mind that I've just seen in my short lifetime that I feel like have been missed and overlooked a lot. And so thank you for bringing to light a lot of that. And I hope we continue to do that. When we were at the blockade, there was an elder, there was a grandma who was with the Alatis, and she told a very powerful story about being forcefully removed from the hogan she was born in when the National Park Service was creating the cultural heritage site that we know now. And so it is a fact that people were forcefully displaced in the name of creating this park. And I think a lot of that resentment goes back to that, right? And I think people can be quick to kind of misconstrue present happenings with this, this very unfortunate history. And I think directing their frustration at the National Park Service is certainly warranted. And I have the utmost empathy for Alatis who feel that way. So, Shai, in your vision, I want to talk to you about how you envision a safe and thriving Greater Chaco community. How do you, in a perfect world, like how do you imagine, people living and thriving in this area that is the Greater Chaco landscape?
Good question, Jen. Can you hear me okay? So, interesting fact about Grandma Atencio is that whenever I saw her at those federal meetings, not one representative from Navajo, from BLM, from DOJ, not one went over there and translated the information. So in a perfect world, all this information we're getting is translated in our language. In a perfect world, Grandma Masane Nele Paul Miss Atencio is put first, because the national park does have a long track of violence against Masane Atencio, and it's very important that she was the first one we're listening to, and we're taking orders from her, as that was said at the blockade. She put Ashone Shachin Shikan Diade to everyone. So if you know what I said, there is a grandmother at the front lines who needs your help right now in understanding all those contracts and understanding each delegate that comes and knocks on her door to propose some wonky action again. Like, in a perfect world, there is someone at each of our elders' house. There's multiple of me's at each of those houses, ready to translate, ready to read those contracts, and ready to move forward and tell these oil and gas industries to get off our lands. Like that, in a perfect world, then we have a nation that is actually working with the people. But unfortunately, that's not the case. But for us to thrive at the grassroots level is us coming together back as a family, and honoring and upholding that to protect each other and the future generations to come. And a lot of things that we're seeing in protecting our elders and assuring that their needs are coming before us is that as community members, our health is considered at the front lines, and we're not just pawns. We're not just a pawn we're just not a political pawn. You can't just come and run for president and get our votes and leave, and then you go and talk shit about us on Fox News and enhance a blockade, and that's okay. Like, in a perfect world, we would totally just have leaders who are wanting to work with us. But also, we have a lot of traditional plants that have been disappearing or slowly disappearing, and the connection to our lands is also disappearing, and the nation prioritizing our nation not upholding the safety of our community is really concerning, and to prioritize crooked politicians before the people. I think every Diné person should know that, right? And we need to continue to protect each other, and to, in a perfect world, grandma is just the first one. And I really understand, like, at the grassroots level, we're really just unheard. And it's sad that you have to have a business in order to get heard and in order for your needs to be met. And that, that's just one part of this whole situation that we're not talking about, is what about us that aren't Alatis? But we have to live and deal with the consequences of these contracts that were being signed, and our family members have moved away. They're no longer here. Grandparents are always looking through the window to see if their grandchildren are gonna come and visit them. And my dad says Naso Jadez, which means our grandparents are continuously looking out the window for their grandkids to come back and help them. And that's exactly, the grassroots conditions right now, is that we have a lot of Alatis who didn't want to sign but were forced to sign, and now have to live with the consequences and have no one to talk to about it. Like, no wonder why we're angry, right? And it's hard, because if we do create those spaces, we're pushed back 10 times more by, like, the opposition, and like the opposition being oil and gas, pro-oil and gas Alatis, who can have all the connections they can get. They can get, an oil and gas company to come to our chapter house and host a toy drive, a food drive, and just making and organizing and getting their needs met. But yet we have grandparents who can't comprehend what's happening, because it's not being translated. We're just hearing, oh, they're here to just give you free stuff. But then grandma asks, where is this coming from? Why is this happening? When is this gonna happen? Who okayed this? And one interesting point that and I'll end with this is like a lot of our grandparents are thinking about like the fundamental law, and like as these leases are pushing through and this buffer zone, why is it that we can't find certain traditional plants? Why is it that the BLM continue to round up these horses but can't fix some of these wells around here? There's so many issues going on, and I have yet to hear any of our Navajo Nation leaders speak on it. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for that very important context, Shai. I think this is what I really want people, I really hope people take what you say to heart, because I think it's so crucial to understanding this issue at large, to understand the position that the Alatis have found themselves historically and presently. And in line with taking that very seriously and taking very seriously their calls to have their land protected, I wanted to direct my next question to Janene, who says that there is something on the horizon in terms of organizing with Alatis and making sure that Alatis have better access to education about their rights and their land. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. And I really want to start off like piggybacking off of what Deja has shared, to like call out our delegates to do a better job. Right now they are maintaining that their current position of the Navajo Nation is that they were against this because this particular council passed a resolution back in February. But it is alarming that when we were at a work session, Nabikiyati work session, in Winter Rock yesterday, to get clarity, like these delegates wanted clarity on what's going on, what are the issues, what happened at the event on Sunday in the blockade. It was alarming how much they didn't really understand or know about this initiative. And yet somehow they passed a resolution saying that their position is that they're against it, when they still haven't gotten the information that they need to truly weigh the pros and cons of that decision. And that is reckless leadership. It is irresponsible and it is dangerous because of the impacts that it's having on our communities on the ground, because of the way that it's misleading people, because of the way that it is furthering the weaponization of the poverty of our people, the language gap, and the lack of access to information, to the benefit of no one other than oil and gas industries. And I want to emphasize that because we had one delegate hold the ground very strongly, Delegate Carl Slater, and he brought the point up. He said, we're saying we're taking this position to protect the rights of these Alatis. He's like, what about the Alatis who support the buffer zone? What about the Navajo people who want to protect the land? What about all of our citizens? We can't pick and choose as leaders who we represent and who we don't. And I'm not sure if that message got across, because at this work session called by our council, in which they called for our Department of Justice to make a testimony, they called for the Office of the President and Vice President to give a statement and to update them and share information, and they called upon the Navajo Nation Police Department to also show up. The only people that showed up were people from the Washington office. And they shared helpful information that laid out the timeline of consultation and of meetings that happened. And they also shared that at the federal level, they're confused about the changing positions of the Navajo Nation and how it's that flip-flopping is endangering our relationship with several key federal entities and ongoing projects and issues that we already have. And so the fact that we weren't able to give information directly to the delegates, that we had Alatis in the gallery, but we weren't allowed to speak at this informal work session, that goes to show that our leadership has a lot of work to do to carry themselves with integrity and to amend the harm that has been created by these statements and these positions that have been made without the proper information that they need to do it right. And, it carries on to today. I just came from an Eastern Navajo Land Agency Commission meeting where they went into executive session, and nowhere on the agenda for their meeting did they say they were going to discuss the Chaco issue, but they went into executive session and they passed a resolution supporting the nullification of the Chaco decision. And that's an illegal act. That is not allowable under our laws and policies. You cannot make a decision as representatives of our people in executive session and not have a discussion that allows public comment. And so this is what we're dealing with when we're talking about the position of the nation, quote unquote. It is not the position of the nation, but of leaders acting without the proper information that they need, and partnering with Republicans to push this effort and furthering this witch hunt against the first Indigenous woman that we have in one of the highest levels of federal office. And so, it's ironic to think about, I don't even know if our Latis know. If our Latis know that while on the ground, people who aren't immediately from the area are being kept from organizing from around there, are speaking about these issues, that our leadership is going all the way to Arizona to partner with the Republicans that don't give a crap about our people, our water issues, our health, our future, our economic situation, to nullify this order. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court issued down this ruling that affects our rights to a permanent homeland on Navajo Nation and our rights to water. The Republicans aren't standing with us on that. So if you follow these things, then you start to see who's really acting in their own interests, and no one is acting in the interests of the Latis and the people on the ground. And so after we saw that, we got together and we discussed among ourselves. We're like, you know what? They're never going to do it. They're never going to go and meet down with the elders, the matriarchs, and the young people that are in these communities. So we're going to take it upon ourselves to create our own space to have that discussion, to bring the solutions that Latis need to hear about, that so that they don't think oil and gas leasing is their only way. Then we can bring models for economic investment that allow them to rest the land, to preserve the land, to protect the land, protect the water, protect the watershed. We can bring in regenerative solutions that promote food security, food sovereignty, that protect our waters, that restore our ecosystem functions. We can support the people who have multiple talents. They're silversmiths, they're potters, they're craftspeople, they're medicinal people. There are other ways that we can support them as their own type of entrepreneurs in ways that don't have to compromise our values as Dene people and protection and the values of protecting our sacred life, our ecosystems, and our lands that we're from. And we're in doing that, we're hoping to host, and we're going to co-design it with Latis that are willing to work with us to host an Latis Land Back Summit, so that we can bring these solutions directly to the people and we can hear from them and we can strategize and create a plan for not only how do we continue to protect this area, but how do we expand that power? How do we restore our relationship with and honor our relationship with all of the peoples who are connected to Chaco, and take back our power over all of our lands, all of our territories, and release ourselves from this grip that these extractive energies have held our communities in for their own benefit, so that we can promote and seed our own solutions for the benefit of all of our peoples, for the benefit of our lands, our waters, and our future generations. And so we look forward to bringing those solutions forward, to creating that space, and to working directly with the landholders and facilitating that.
Wonderful. Geez, that is historic, and I'm so looking forward to that. Once again, when we say land back, it's not a metaphor, right? It's very real, and this makes me so excited to see concrete steps being taken to center the Alatis that Shai reminds us go so unheard by everyone, including well-intentioned people, right? So I'm super excited for this. Stay tuned for more information on all of these, on, the way the news progresses, and as well as the Alatis Rights Summit. I want to give everybody a chance to say any final thoughts, and I also want to ask everybody where our listeners can keep up with you, social media or anything like that. Where can they keep up with you and your work, you and your organization's work?
I guess I'll go first. I mean, you can follow us at NDN Collective. We're on all of the social platforms. You can follow me at Janene Yazzie. I'm really bad at posting, so I don't expect to get a lot, except for when it's like really important information that needs to get out to community. But I would also highly encourage to follow some of the people who aren't here. The Greater Chaco Coalition, Frack Free New Mexico, Dene Care. There are a lot of people who've put a lot of energy and resources into helping, build this work and support this work for a long time. And so I think we'll share some of those links and resources when we send out this podcast. But the more people we need at the front lines, the better. The more the merrier. We need everyone to get involved in this, because this is just the first step in a long process of our liberation and of freeing ourselves and our building our collective power. And we invite everyone to be part of that transformation.
And I'll piggyback off of Janene. Since we are both at NDN Collective, those are, I think it's just at NDN Collective on every platform. And then I'm at _Jade Begay on Twitter. I try to do my best to stay up with all the things, but just thank you so much for having this conversation. And I'm just really excited about the work moving forward, and just, we're talking about land back, but I also see this as like a truth back moment as we continue to fight, the misinformation and work to make sure that our relatives have all of the information so we can really lead with that and lead with the facts.
Thank you, Jade. I guess I could go next. My closing thoughts are: challenge your leaders. Challenge the information you're being given, unneeded. Ask them, is that really the truth though? Because we need everyone's help, especially in checkerboard region, Donetska, all my res natives, all my resi reds. Now is the time to really challenge our leaders. And so there's that. And then also my Instagram is Cheyenne, IINACHEY, Ina. And I'm not too big on my Instagram. And it's funny because I have some students who are like, well, no one uses Facebook, miss, but you can also find me on Facebook, Cheyenne Antonio with the longest last name. And then I am also at the Greater Chaco Coalition too, trying to figure that space out and organize in that space. And I've been organizing in that space. But you can find me there. But mostly you could catch me at the chapter house. Like, I'm not too big online, but you can find me at the chapter house at a meeting. So thank you. And I'll pass it to Teran.
Well, first and foremost, thank you to these matriarchs on the call. Appreciate your wisdom, the transfer of knowledge, and your commitment to reclaiming space and power. I want to express my appreciation to Indigenous women who are moving a lot of this work, the hard work, in order to protect landscapes and to address the implications of climate change. I want to share our appreciation to Alatis and Navajo people who are willing to learn what the Pueblo position is on Chaco Canyon, and that this is a position that is mindful of Indigenous needs and the economic vitality needs as well. I also want to communicate that you can find information, and we're going to be moving to share more information at apcg.org. I am blessed to serve in this humble capacity and service to the All Pueblo Council of Governors, but I do want to underscore that under their leadership, Chairman Mark Mitchell and Vice Chairman Jerome Lucero and Secretary Arden Kukate, that they have supported this information being communicated. I also want to just express that if you're interested and willing to take the capacity to learn about the implications of mineral development and really the work to preserve our communities, our languages, our cultures, and the vitality of our people, that we encourage you to seek language and culture as you can, and we call on all federal entities and partners and states to continue to invest back into our nation so that we can address over 100 years of federal Indian boarding school implications and policies. But with that being said, it's been an honor. I appreciate everyone's time, and thank you so much. You can find me on social media, and you'll probably see a lot of photos with my wife, Aaliyah Chavez, at ICT News Anchor. Throw a shout out to them. But with that being said, I appreciate everybody's time, and you can follow me anywhere on social media at Teran Villa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for this wonderful, productive, highly informative, and I would say historic conversation. Once again, I deeply appreciate everybody offering their time, energy, and wisdom. I know that this is hard work, and sometimes it can feel bitter, but I honestly have nothing but good feelings of hope for what the future holds, truly, for the sake of our land, our human and non-human relatives, and for all of us as people too. So thank you so much, everybody. Kutawaha, and have a good night. Thank you again for all our listeners tuning in and keeping up with this topic too. Sengiri Hope.